President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me thank my colleague from Maryland for outlining one of the cases for why the override of the president's veto is so important. There is no question that Saudi Arabia has in no way moderated their human rights behavior since the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi. In fact, as Senator Van Hollen has rightly pointed out, the stick in America's eye from Riyadh has just gotten sharper. The number of executions has increased. More American citizens are being detained. I didn't catch it as to whether Senator Van Hollen specifically referenced the case of Dr. Fatahi, a Harvard-trained physician who has allegedly been tortured, including stripped to his underwear and shocked with electricity. He has been in detention without charges or a trial for a year and a half after his arrest. The Saudis' behavior has gotten more outrageous, has crossed more human rights lines, has compromised the safety of more American citizens, and yet no response from the United States Congress. Not a single piece of legislation moving through the United States Senate that would hold the Saudis accountable for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and now the detention of multiple U.S. residents. We almost shut down our relationship with Turkey over the detainment of an American pastor, but there is no similar response from this body when it comes to the continued detention of Americans in Saudi Arabia with no trial, with no charges, and with evidence of torture. How is that? How is that? Today, we specifically litigate the case of the disastrous war that continues to rage inside Yemen today. I want to read you a very short excerpt written by a hardened U.S. diplomat. Jeffrey Feltman is not a Democrat or Republican. He was a career Foreign Service officer, did some of the toughest duty in the Middle East, including a stint as our ambassador to Lebanon. Many people know him, and I know he commands just as much respect from Republicans as he does from Democrats. Here's what he wrote. He said, "The war in Yemen has been a disaster for U.S. interests, for Saudi interests, and above all for the Yemeni people. It has sparked the world's largest humanitarian catastrophe. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed and 14 million are at risk of starvation. It has been a strategic blunder as well, producing the exact results the Saudi-led military campaign was designed to prevent. The Houthis are more militarily sophisticated and better able to strike beyond Yemen's borders than they were at the start of the war. Iranian influence has expanded, and the relationship between the Houthis and Lebanon's Hezbollah has only deepened. And although the UAE has waged an effective battle against al-Qaeda in Yemen, terrorism remains a grave threat." Now, I could read you similar pronouncements from all sorts of other Middle Eastern experts. There is a hegemony of opinion that this war has been a disaster, not just from a humanitarian standpoint. And I had to select a picture that frankly wouldn't induce sickness from my colleagues. I chose a picture in which this young, starving boy's back is turned to the camera, but there are plenty others in which you would have a hard time holding down your lunch. It's not just the humanitarian nightmare, it is the strategic nightmare that is Yemen. Every single day that we stay involved in this war, the battle lines do not change. And yet, Iran and Hezbollah get more and more involved inside the military fight. There is a political deal to be had here. If the United States chose to lead diplomatically instead of follow militarily, there is a political deal that can be had. But for reasons that I do not understand, the United States does not lead the diplomatic negotiations. We outsource that to the UN. I'm a big fan of the UN, but there is not going to be a peace settlement in Yemen without the United States as the lead. Instead, we simply choose to follow the military campaign of the Saudis by helping them engage in a bombing campaign that has murdered thousands of civilians, either on purpose or by accident, has destroyed the civilian infrastructure of the country. And it does not relent. Every single time you meet with somebody from the administration, they tell you, well, it's getting better, it's getting better. There's really no evidence of that. On March 26th, airstrikes reportedly hit a hospital supported by Save the Children in northwest Yemen, killing at least 7, including 4 children. And there's no excuse for that, because every single hospital is on the list of targets that the Saudis can't hit, and yet they continue to do so. Senator Romney and I just came back from the region. Here's what we heard. All of the relief agencies that do the big heavy lifting in Yemen flew into Amman, Jordan, to talk to our delegation. I thought it was exceptional that they were making this trip. But then when they delivered the news that they had, I understood why they were making the trip into Jordan to meet with us. The report that they gave us was absolutely bone-chilling. And I want you to listen to this. Today in Yemen, there are 250,000 Yemenis who are so malnourished and so sick that they are beyond saving. They will die. 250,000 Yemenis are so sick, are so malnourished that they cannot be saved. And another 10 million are on the cusp of entering that category. The only way to stop this humanitarian disaster of a scope and scale that we see nowhere else in the world is to end this civil war. And so long as the United States participates in the military campaign with the Saudis, while not offering any meaningful pressure to get to a political settlement, we are complicit in those deaths. 250,000 people are going to die in the next several months inside Yemen from starvation and disease and malnutrition due to a military campaign that we are a part of. Don't get me wrong, the Houthis bear a great degree of responsibility for those that are starving inside territories that they control. There is still 15 to 20% of relief supplies that the Houthis steal and take for themselves, but hundreds of thousands of those who are dying or who are subject to disease and famine are in the parts of the country that are controlled by our coalition. This isn't just a matter of the Houthis refusing to let supplies get to people that need them. There are people dying in parts of the country that the coalition, of which the United States is a part of, controls. And we are standing by largely idly as this devastation continues. I hope that my colleagues will consider voting to overturn the president's veto. I hope that you will do it because it is the only means by which we force a political settlement. I hope you will do it because even if you don't think that a political settlement is coming, the United States should never willingly be a part of a bombing campaign that results in this kind of starvation. But I hope you will also do it because even if you believe that Iran is the #1 objective of U.S. interests in the region, or even if you believe that al-Qaeda and ISIS are the #1 target of U.S. interests in the region, they are getting stronger every single day that the status quo continues. The military campaign has been a massive failure. The battle lines don't move, and al-Qaeda and ISIS remain uniquely strong inside that country because of the chaos, and Iran every single day becomes more and more influential. Get out of the military campaign, take the lead on the diplomatic effort rather than simply follow others, and we will end this misery. It is within our power to send that message. I agree with Senator Van Hollen This is also about sending a message to Saudi Arabia about the continued murder and detainment of American citizens and residents. This is about standing up for human rights in the face of 37 people convicted and beheaded inside Saudi Arabia, several of them minors. But this is also about squaring U.S. policy with national security interests and getting the blood off of our hands as 250,000 Yemenis face certain death if we don't do something different very soon. I yield the floor.